And I think that's ridiculous because that comes from a very narrow-minded perspective, assuming that everyone has perfect families, that everyone doesn't struggle to put food on the table, that, everyone doesn't have to worry about where their next meal is going to come from. A lot of people during this time are struggling. And so I think that the biggest thing is be kind to yourself, because it's okay to sometimes not be okay.
Yeah.
And really just acknowledge that, this is a difficult time for everyone. And so don't bash yourself up just because you see some dude on LinkedIn who seems to be killing it.
Welcome to Gen Z Talks, where today we're going to be discussing a number of important topics relating to Gen Z, including the changes in the workplace, empowering Generation Z, gender collaboration, mental health, and skills relating to Generation Z. And today we're very happy and honoured to have a guest all the way from Australia, who I'd like to welcome to give a brief background and who will be sharing his knowledge, experience and wisdom. So welcome Nathaniel Diong. Hello, how
Thanks
are
for
you?
having me, Dan.
A
What an
pleasure.
intro. What an intro. Thanks for having me. How should I describe myself? You've put me on the spot here. Well, I'm Nathaniel, right? I'm all the way in Australia, Malaysian Chinese by heritage, and I'm a Gen Z educator. So I work a lot with high schoolers and sort of look into how I can support them for the future of work. The main thing that we do is we're helping build the next generation of young entrepreneurs. So we work with high schoolers one-on-one to turn their ideas into reality. And that often takes the form of startups, non-for-profits, social enterprises. And it's really interesting just to see, starting from nothing, how we can just transform an idea and build it into something bigger. That's a lot of what I do in my work. I also mentor and judge a lot of early stage startups across the world, in UC Berkeley, UN affiliated hackathons, and various universities as well.
Excellent. And Nathaniel, you're obviously working very closely with Generation Z. What skill set are you seeing from this generation so early on, at such a young age? Because I know obviously they're known for being tech savvy, digitally native.
Yeah,
So
totally.
what kind of exciting things are you seeing early on from this generation?
There's a lot, I think. I think most noticeably, like outside of, well, the skill sets obviously being more technical savvy, and I think that's because of the sheer access to technology. Like we're in a time where everything is so accessible right now. There are so many different types of emerging tech that you can play with. Technology is literally at our fingertips every step of the way, like from our phones to our laptops. And so it's almost like this design is so intuitive in our everyday life that when we onboard new digital technologies, it becomes easier. So I think digital literacy is definitely a big skill set that we have. But apart from that, I would say what's even bigger than skills is the mindset that we have. I think in Generation Z in particular, there's a mindset where you can almost achieve anything that you set your mind to now. I think it comes a lot from being told a lot that young people are the future leaders of tomorrow, but then not actually having the opportunity to go out there and create and campaign and to speak, and just being so sick of waiting that young people are starting to just take the step forward and fail no matter the cost. And so you see that with the rise of Greta Thunberg, you see that with the rise in what I call sort of social media advocacy. And there are so many routes that you can take. But I think what's really important and special about our generation now is how active they are and how active they want to be in creating the future they sit in.
Excellent. And this generation, your generation, has been really disrupted and affected by COVID-19.
Mm.
But do you think this has made Generation Z stronger, especially building up a skill set? I'm thinking of a skill which is so important for life and for business, is empathy.
Mm.
And this generation, your generation, has kind of sacrificed their education in a way where they've kind of haven't been allowed into the schools, but they understand the bigger picture, and they understand that what they're doing is for the better of the world, that there's people suffering.
Mm.
Do you think this empathy skill that they've probably built up during the lockdown is going to put them in good stead going forward?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, COVID has been such a confronting time for everyone across the world. Not just young people, like
Yeah,
all different communities. And I think in times of change and times of uncertainty, we're forced to make a change. And so, in a sense, like our only way is theoretically, our only way is up from here, right? Because we've reached rock bottom. And so, I definitely think it is something that is helping to strengthen communities of youth, particularly in reference to what you said with empathy. I think that's particularly relevant as well, because what's happening here is COVID-19 doesn't just affect one community, it affects everybody.
right.
And so it's almost like we have this shared level of pain. And not to say that like we all experience pain in the same way, because many communities are more damaged by what COVID has given than others. But just simply a shared pain that all of us can say, it's been difficult. And I think that sort of acknowledgement really does build empathy, because we're able to connect with other youth who are in these communities and, just agree that it sucks.
Yeah,
And so bringing in this mindset of empathy into the world that we're living in post COVID, I think will be really important for young people to continue thinking, what are ways that we can continue working together to create something better amidst a world of uncertainty.
yeah. And to elaborate on working together, the vision I think many people are starting to believe in is that generations can learn from each other and work together for a better future. Are you seeing skills, knowledge, and influence from Generation Z, which can really benefit older generations, and who older generations should tap into to learn from the younger generation the fresh mindset, so that the generations can work together to rebuild from the damage that COVID-19 has caused?
Definitely. I think where that lies is sort of enterprise skills and a growth mindset. So a lot of the things that I teach in schools is these enterprise skills. So things like creativity, problem solving, cognitive flexibility. And it's really interesting because all of these things are almost like common sense. But what we do differently is actually give young people the frameworks to actually realize the knowledge that they have inside of them and be able to apply them in real life projects. And that's what makes it special. And so I definitely see this, like I mentioned earlier, young people have this opinion that they can do anything and they're feeling a bit more empowered. And I think building on that allows them to develop more skills like creativity and innovation, and look at the new ways of work that we can embrace. I think like this intergenerational gap would really benefit from seeing both sides of the perspective. So from having that innovation from young people, and also seeing, from an older person's perspective who's had that lived experience in the industry, how can both of those two parties work together to combine their skill sets? So I think, it's something that it's really interesting to explore, because even if you think about it this way, right? If you think about a student from primary school and a student from high school, you'll often find, this is a gross overgeneralization, but you'll often find that the high schoolers are more cynical in what they can achieve. Because when you're younger, you're not told the things you can't do. And so, you have these big dreams of what you want to be in the future and what you want to achieve. By the time you get to high school, you've been bashed so much by the education system that you think you can only go through one pathway. So I think, particularly with the younger generation, what will be really productive is really digging into their creativity and innovation and continuing to give them platforms to express themselves and create things. And if we can work together as a generation to combine that with the industry experience that older generations have had, then it's definitely like a match made in heaven.
Excellent. And so in terms of the changes in the workplace going forward, what other kind of key changes, not just the mindset, but the key changes in the new norm of work that are going to be coming? So when work
Yeah.
is gradually going back to, well, it's going back to normal now, but over the coming few months, couple of years, what kind of place do Generation Z have in the workplace, and how should established workers be embracing them going forward?
Mm. Yeah, look, I think even before COVID-19, the way that we work in our environments have constantly been changing. And so we often refer it to as the future of work, right? So the future of work is where basically you look into, how is automation and emerging technology changing the ways that we work? Everything from, blockchain to cloud-based computing, the Internet of Things, all of these things have been influencing us like way before COVID. And now I think increasingly during COVID, it's come to our attention that this digital transformation in manufacturing technology has affected our everyday lives as well. Even the way, like, take away, I guess it's not as much to do with manufacturing, but technology in general, like the way that we've transitioned to Zoom calls being the norm across different countries and university transitioning online. These are all important things that are shaping the future of work. I think in the new normal, what's really going to be pushed is this focus on human skills, right?
Yeah.
Because amidst this automation in the future of work, automation can replace things like, knowledge sharing and absorbing information, and it can replace technical skills, but it can't replace human skills as of yet.
Yeah.
And so these things, these enterprise skills that I'm talking about, like creativity and problem solving, can't be taught through an algorithm. And so in our future employment, in our future workplaces, these are what are going to be the most important skills.
Sure.
And it's already been proven, like in the World Economic Forum, I think in January this year, it was shown that human or enterprise skills were 3 times more in demand than technical skills by employers already, like at the start of this year. And this was before COVID. And so I think definitely that's going to be a trend that we're going to see moving forward.
Excellent. And I want to speak a bit further about human skills, particularly kind of communication face to face. One concern I have is the push for working from home, which could have which will have a really big negative impact on the younger generation. And with mental health cases increasing on the back of education and other disruptions to graduate jobs, the office kind of environment would have been a big positive aspect for them to communicate with people, to feel part of a team, to feel part of almost a membership, and to have a belonging. And this is going to be taken
community.
Exactly. And this is going to be taken away from certain sectors and certain companies who have already implemented it. What concerns do you have in terms of skills development, communication development, and also the isolation aspect and the impact and effect it will have on the mental health of the younger generation?
Yeah, this is a tough one. That's a lot of things to unpack there, from the skills and community to the mental health. And I think It's a really tough question to answer. Look, there are working from home is almost like a double-edged sword. I know that working from home has and was pushed way before COVID, but employers said, no, that's impossible. There's no way we would ever allow that. But because of the situation of COVID, they've been forced to embrace that. And so I think for some people, it's been amazing and something that they've been waiting for a long time. So I'm talking about the accessibility for people to go to work. Some people might be living with disabilities. They might have children or like a family member that really needs attention. So they might be a carer. And you know, this working from home balance might work better for them because they otherwise would have to be at work 24/7 and not be able to be coping living with a disability or caring for a loved one. And so I think this work from home has really been good in that sense for certain communities. But for others, like you said, communication is a whole new topic of conversation because it's almost like at the end of this, we'll be so used to communicating through laptops and through a screen that physical interactions will be very different. And I think it's interesting the ways that we're like getting about that now. Like I see a rise within Generation Z in digital communities, and it's been something before COVID as well. I mean, you look at the gaming industry and you know the sense of digital community has always built up because you play with another person who you don't know across the world and you're building connection there. But to what extent and to what impact is that connection really relevant to you is sort of my question. When you're working in teams, it's really important to understand the people that you're working with. But if you're spending a lot of time digital, you might not sort of see them a lot of the time because it's not like while you're working, you're on the Zoom call for the entire day. So you won't actually get that physical interaction of seeing your coworkers around the space. So I think it will be very different. But definitely like this is not something that I can predict or accurately describe. I definitely think there'll be changes, but whether they'll be positive or negative, I'm not sure. I have no idea.
Okay. And Nathaniel, I know that you're involved with mentorship
Mm.
for Generation Z. How do you see mentorship in the workplace if it's going to be done remotely? What kind of solutions can employers maybe think about in terms of making sure that new workers from Generation Z are motivated, supervised, and developed? Do you think something like virtual mentoring will be effective, or do you think that there are other ways which can be kind of thought of and implemented? Is that something you've thought of as a mentor in terms of
Yeah.
the future of mentorship in the workplace?
To be honest, my personal opinion, and this is not like, you know, a framework or something that is truth, is the definition of truth. But I think that it really depends on the individual. And, you know, learning has always been different from person to person. And so I would argue that even in regular mentorship situations, individuals might not get the most out of it, despite it being physical. And it's not really a issue of like, is it physical or is it virtual? But like, to what extent is this mentorship productive and effective? You know, to what extent is that individual actually actively using their mentor to build upon certain skills? Because what we find, particularly in mentorship, is if you're not able to get past the stage of vulnerability and, you know, it's this concept of psychological safety, right? Like if you aren't able to build a relationship with your mentor enough, you will never go in depth enough to tackle the real problems at hand. And so that's a reason why sometimes mentorship isn't effective, because you don't get to the level where you actually dig deeper into the problems, understand these problems, and create strategies with your mentor to actually fix these. And I think regardless of whether it's physical or virtual, that's something you can do as a mentor, but isn't done well. So I would say instead, shift the perspective. how can we look at the way that we're currently doing mentorship and its effectiveness in the systems rather than whether it's in person or on digital?
Excellent. Great answer. And I know we discussed it, I think, previously when I first spoke with you about the concept of reverse mentoring, where the older and the younger worker kind of understand each other better from learning from each other's mindset. And could this be an effective way going forward in terms of mentorship, is for the younger and older generations to learn and to share, skill set, mindset, ideas, to actually have more productive results going forward?
100%. Look, I think the beauty of being human is that each of us are different and each of us have different perspectives. When you look at it from a demographic point of view, every single different demographic has a different view of the world. And so if we're going to start tackling complex problems, we need to combine all of these views to see the entire Rubik's Cube, right? We can't solve it with just one side. And so if we're like taking that from the reverse mentoring approach, right? If we're not actively learning from people who are under us, and I put that in quotations because they're not, they're people just like us. Everyone is human. But often it's perceived that people who are younger than us don't know enough or don't have the experience to mentor us, right? But if we don't actually have that collaboration between these two generations, we're just going to keep tackling the same problems with the same ways of thinking. And that's not going to change anything. And so I think particularly reverse mentoring is such a great way for us to learn from each other. And, typically it is done in an informal setting because it's hard to sort of like humble yourself down to listen to somebody else and learn from their lived experience. Because often as a mentor, you come in and you think about what can I offer them in value, not what can they offer me. So yeah, it's a very interesting dynamic. And I think it's something that we have to learn to approach if we want to solve complex problems, because we'll never be able to see the full side of the story if we just rely on one side of the cube.
Excellent. I want to finish up, Nathaniel. I mean, you've provided an extremely insightful information in regards to Generation Z and possible solutions going forward. I just wondered if you've got any additional advice for Generation Z whose education's been disrupted, whose starter jobs have been disrupted, and who might be feeling a bit lost at the moment as to what path to take. What advice would you give them going forward to give them some hope and to add positivity?
That's a tough one. I think the biggest one is learn to be kind to yourself. I think in a world that's increasingly pressurized, you might have heard this before, right? If you don't come out with COVID with a new skill or a new hobby or some great like grades from university, you've wasted it. And I think that's ridiculous because that comes from a very narrow-minded perspective, assuming that everyone has perfect families, that everyone doesn't struggle to put food on the table, that everyone doesn't have to worry about where their next meal is going to come from. A lot of people during this time are struggling. And so I think that the biggest thing is be kind to yourself, because it's okay to sometimes not be okay.
Yeah.
And really just acknowledge that, this is a difficult time for everyone. And so don't bash yourself up just because you see some dude on LinkedIn who seems to be killing it. Because in reality, we're all human. We're not perfect. What a lot of people put up on social media is a front. So above all, be kind to yourself and know there's still time, because it is a time of uncertainty, but it's also a time for you to grow in yourself. And growing doesn't mean that you have to get a new skill, a new job, a new hobby. just means you might have time to learn to love yourself and be kind and be able to share that with other people.
Excellent. Well, some fantastic answers, Nathaniel. And really, thank you for sharing. I'm sure Generation Z are going to take a lot of wisdom from what you've had to say. And I know that you're doing great work with this generation, and it's much appreciated by the younger generation and people that you're impacting on a daily basis. So keep up the good work. And
thanks for having me.
No, it's been a pleasure, and look forward to keeping in touch.